All right, here we go. We are live streaming on Facebook on the Red or Green Books Facebook page. Thank you all so very much for being here today for American Graveyard Calls to End Gun Violence Podcast Live. I'm your host, Marissa Prada. I am joined by Rick Spisak, Laura Greville, Kellyanne Parker, and Harriet Engel right here in Albuquerque. So it's very exciting to be welcoming everyone today. If I mispronounce people's names, I so am sorry. Let me know if I do. I will promise to do my best not to do that again, but hopefully that did not happen today. It is Saturday, February 1st, 2025, and today's topic is calling 911 and meeting Al Sharpton. As we get started today, I will go ahead and read our mission statement and our disclaimer that we do at the top of every single podcast, and we're going to dive right in today. Our mission statement: American Graveyard Podcast Live is an international collection of artists who come together in a unified global call for an end to gun violence. Each month, we will cover a different topic centered around gun violence. The podcast is composed of facts, opinions, personal stories, local and global news and events, historical information, and other such matters. We will list where information was obtained and do our best to ensure that citations are from reputable and true sources. This is a free speech, not a hate speech zone. If I feel you're a threat to anyone in the room, you will be kicked out, banned, and not allowed back in. So please just be respectful. Our disclaimer: this podcast will discuss topics that may be graphic in nature and are unacceptable for some audiences, especially children. The discussions may include firsthand accounts, videos, audios, photographs, articles centered around gun violence. The opinions and viewpoints expressed during the show are not necessarily the opinions and viewpoints of every host, guest host, special guest, Red or Green Books, or The Word is Right. Viewer listener discretion is advised. All right, let's go. First off, if you have not got your copy of American Graveyard, please go to the website and do it. We have our original. This is volume 1, American Graveyard Calls to End Gun Violence. It is a lengthy, hefty 200-page book. 67 contributors from 8 different countries and 26 states are in here. This is amazing. Cover art by Coach Doss Smalls and myself. And then we have the American Graveyard art book. This is a full-colored art book with poetry. Cover art by Ella Diem. So if you want, you can get both of these books on the website for $40. That's it. That's an incredible gift. If you're not, if you don't want maybe to spend that much, for $15, you can have us send a copy of this book to U.S. State Senator of your choice. Go to the website, redorgreenbooks.com, red, READ. You can even pick the state that you would like us to send the book to. There's only 2 books per state. So if your state is sold out, please pick a different state. But we will we'll re-up that when the new election happens and the second volume comes out. Speaking of the second volume, we received hundreds and hundreds of poetry submissions from around the world. And I'm so excited that we have received submissions from so many new countries and new states and new cities that we had never published from before, and only 20 of the people who submitted were repeat submissions from the original anthology. So it is a bunch of new people, new poems, new backgrounds, new everything. The cover art is pretty much solidified now, and pre-orders will be available soon. The book will launch this spring, summer. I say that with air quotes because we still have a lot to do on the book before we actually get it to print. All right. That is that. If you are interested in hosting or guest hosting on our Out Loud podcast live, please reach out to us at Red or Green Books. We have host slots open. Out Loud is our LGBTQ anthology, and that is a brave space for our queer community. So if you're interested in being a part of that, please reach out to us and let us know. All right, special shout out to Alexis Garcia. When she submitted for American Graveyard, we didn't have a title for it, but her poem was titled American Graveyard. And so every podcast I homage her and say, thank you, Alexis Garcia, Vex Lex, if you don't know her online, for the namesake of the anthology. And it's really evolved into so much more than just a book. It is a movement. Okay. Last show, we talked about resolutions and grieving gun violence, right? It was January, start of a brand new year. What are our personal resolutions? What are our resolutions as artists and as professionals in this industry? And how do we grieve, right? We talked a lot about Sue Klebold Dylan Klebold's mom and her TED Talk. That was a brilliant. And so if you've not had a chance to see or listen to our podcast from last month, please do so. All right, this month our topic is calling 911 and meeting Al Sharpton. Before we jump into so much of a discussion, I do want to invite the hosts. I usually invite them in the order that they come into the room to greet us. If they have anything that they want to say for this podcast as we get going, and then I'm going to show us the 2 clips that I have on YouTube. They're very short of Al Sharpton making comments during gun violence incidents in this country. Also, before we technically get going, I do want to say our deepest condolences and our hearts go out to the families of those affected by the 2 plane crashes, the one that happened in DC and the one that happened in Philadelphia. We honor our service members in uniform who died in that tragedy, and we honor the families and the ones who were lost in that, including the members of the U.S. figure skating community. And our deepest condolences for the families and those affected in the Philadelphia plane crash as well. It seems like every time we start this podcast, there has been some sort of violence in this country, even though the plane crashes are not due to gun violence. It is a tragic loss of life. And I do want to acknowledge that as we dig into today and begin to talk about more loss of life. So I will invite Rick, if Rick wants to introduce himself, and then I'll invite Harriet, Laura, and Kellyanne.
Hi, my name is Rick Spizak. I have been a writer for a long time and have been very concerned about the proliferation of violence and the casual uh, the casual thinking that so many people seem to exhibit about the use of guns as a problem-solving tool. I've been anti-war since I joined, came to my teens, and this was during the Vietnam War era. Some of you remember back that far. And I came across a horrible statistic that I want to share with you. Um, it's mind blowing. Many of us have opposed war for a long time. And I want you to look at this statistic just for a second. It points out that just since 1968, there's been more firearms death than people who have died in all the wars Americans have fought. Since the Revolutionary War to the global war on terror, so called, 1.53 million human beings have died from firearms, but only 1.2 million from war. A war is a terrible thing, and we all sort of have an appreciation of that. But to think that just since 1968, more people have died from gun violence, that really puts it in perspective. So many of these things are tools of war and only tools of war. And for people to pretend that they're for protection around the home, that's not the experience I have, and clearly it's not what the statistics show. Thank you so much. I'm here because our dear friend Marissa has made this a very important part of her publishing campaign. Red or Green Books is committed to putting an end to gun violence. Thank you, Marissa. I'm glad to have a small part in helping.
I have so much love for you. Like, for those who don't, like, nobody knows everyone's backstory, right? But many of us have been together since the start of COVID and seen each other through an incredible amount of strife in our own personal lives and sometimes in our professional lives. And so there's a lot of love in this room. So thank you so much, Rick. All right, Harriet, would you like to introduce yourself and welcome your first time on an American Graveyard Podcast Live?
Sure. My name's Harriet Engel. I am a rural Midwesterner who transplanted to New Mexico about 17 years ago. I have a slightly different perspective in some ways because growing up in the country, guns were a tool. That's what they are. You use them for what you need: hunting, and home protection from wild animals, because yes, we did have them. The NRA that I grew up with, the R also stood for responsibility. It doesn't anymore. I think it stands for Republican, in my humble opinion. The only reason I'm still a member is because it was paid for long ago. They don't get any more of my money. I grew up in a society where, November 15th, first day of deer season, half the guys in school would come in late to first period of school because they'd gone out and gotten their buck this morning, and if the buck wasn't in the back of the truck, the gun still was in the rack, locked up. What has happened in the last 40, 50 years disgusts me. People have forgotten how to handle things without guns. Everybody's like, oh, this is easy, point, click, shoot. And they don't realize, I think, that that's not a video game. It's a freaking life on both ends of that piece of metal. And it worries me because not only does it show that we have cheapened life, anything other than me doesn't count, doesn't matter. But we've lost the skills that it takes to keep society civil and keep the civil in civilization. And that is what worries me about the current waves of gun violence, is that, sure, if we didn't have guns, there would still be violence, but it would be slower and it would not be immediately lethal. Guns have one purpose, and that is to kill things. Point, click, boom, something's going to die. A bullet can go anywhere. I had a friend who got clobbered by a stray on New Year's Eve once. But it's going to go somewhere. Somebody's going to be impacted by that. And I think we all need to realize the impact that gun violence is having on not only our lives, but the lives of those around us and the lives of the next generations coming up. And I want to thank Marissa for inviting me along on this, because while I still feel that there is a place for guns, it's not on the streets. It's not in this context. And I think sometimes that gets forgotten, but
it's very true. I mean, it's like when you said we've cheapened life. I feel that in my bones, right? When did human beings start to be numbers, start to be illegal, start to be not worthy, start their life not to matter?
Well, I forget who said it first. I should have looked up the darn quote. But the problem comes when people start treating people as things.
Mm-hmm. We saw this. We saw this in World War II. I mean, we're seeing very similar, the beginnings of very similar thought processes of how to animalize humans, how to negate their humanity. And then you said we've lost skills to keep society civil, which is very true. With children, we teach, or we think about how we want to teach our children how to be emotionally regulated, how to talk through their emotions, how to be able to express their emotions, to put words to how they're feeling. Us as poets, as artists, we put words to how we're feeling. We express how we feel with our pen and our paper and a microphone. But we don't, we're really teaching children how to recognize their emotions, how to express themselves with discussion and dialogue, and are we holding space to receive that when they aren't feeling so good? And I don't think that that's happening in this country, as we see the suicide rates of children on the rise. In the last 6 months, I've had 3 or 4 close friends of mine bury either their children, their brothers or sisters, or their brother or sister-in-laws, and from suicide. And so we have to be able to regulate ourselves and hold space to help others learn how to do it so that they can talk about how they're feeling, right? We did talk a lot about suicide towards the end of 2024 on this podcast. We did a whole suicide show. And so it's important. Just know that you matter and what you're feeling matters, and you're not alone, and it won't last forever. It won't always be like this, right? You matter. 988, that's the suicide hotline number. Reach out to someone, talk to someone. But it's very true, Harriet. It's not this isn't a game. It's not it's not on the television. These are lives. And today we're going to talk about the incidents that happened in Albuquerque where a young child was shot and killed, even though they were performing an armed robbery, because they don't. I mean, how did children really understand the gravity of their actions? And
when I was that age, I certainly didn't understand death.
you don't know, right? But you bring up some very, very good points. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Laura to go ahead and welcome herself, and then Kellyanne, and we'll jump into the Al Sharpton videos.
Okay, thank you very much, Marissa. It's an honor to be here today. And I come from some of the sort of a mix of the previous speakers. I was raised in Austin, Texas. I lived there for 40 years, so I certainly know American culture. And since then, I've lived in different countries in Europe, 4 different countries. So I have experience of, a different setup for as relating to guns and society in those places. And later I'll read a poem or two related to that, because I think it's important for younger people, say 30 or early 30s, haven't lived as long as some of us who are older, and remember when society in the US was more civil, and it wasn't that people had a problem and they all rushed out and got another gun, and people weren't allowed to carry guns around. And I just think it's important to educate the young people to say that wasn't always like this, and I didn't grow up fearing that because it wasn't a problem. And so I come from, yes, I'm a writer. I've been writing off and on since I was 17, and love the written word. And I write poetry, essays, fiction, and yes, we need to learn to express ourselves in poetry, in dialogue, and not with a gun. And I come from a family, well, my family, some of them are from the rural areas, so I do understand what Harry was talking about guns for hunting, guns to shoot a snake that's threatening you it's right on your porch or something, you feel threatened. I understand that, but when I grew up and I was taught by my grandparents who were rural people, you do not need a gun in the city, because guns in the city are to kill people, and that's wrong. And so I was, strongly taught that, and guns were kept locked in a gun closet at the country location and not carried around in a car or with you. Only the bad guys back then did that, or the sheriff. but not normal, everyday people did not do that. And so also I've experienced, as I think most Americans have, I've had friends, a friend who was 14, he died of gun violence at a friend's house because that person's father had an unlocked drawer with a gun and they were playing with it, and my friend died. There was no blame. It was a horrible tragedy, and my family's friends, their only son died at the age of 14, Douglas. And I've had cousins who died. Yes, an ex-husband got mad and went in and shot my cousin, my father's first cousin. So I've had, family who've died and friends, and can go further out, but we all have those stories, and it grieves me so to see my country go this road, and that's why I'm here today. Thank you.
And it's so true. Guns in this city are to kill people. I think it's very simple, right? It's an incredibly simple concept that if you feel the need, I've said this for a long time. If you feel the need to carry an AK-47 in a Walmart because you don't feel safe, or if you feel the need to carry a sidearm on you all the time in the city, that's not the problem. It's the fact that everyone else has a gun. There's a great deal of issues happening with those people. There's a lot of drug use. There's not enough access to mental health care. There's all these things, right? And then you have the violent gangs, which of course we're going to talk about today. And so if you feel the need to carry an AK-47 in Walmart, you need to put that gun down and be part of this mission, because this is where the problems begin to get solved. Not carrying an AK-47 in a Walmart. And with all these kids being shot in school, with all the violence that is happening, you carrying an AK-47 is going to be much more damaging to those around you than it is for you to not have an AK-47 in a Walmart. I'm just put that out. All right, Kelly.
Hello, really nice to be here. Thank you so much. Such a critically important conversation. I'm a poet. I now live in Oregon, but I grew up in Los Angeles and spent a lot of years in the San Francisco Bay Area. And, as a kid growing up in Los Angeles, I have a white conservative father and a Mexican American mother. So, dad has guns, mom's against guns. And so had like this really interesting firsthand view of different ways of living. But also being from big cities, one of the things that, has been something that's a fear for someone whose family is also largely brown, of police violence. And so, the fear, that I have for like my son driving around, getting pulled over by the police. And, I lived very near where Sean Monterosa was killed, a 22-year-old who was unarmed and, was going to a George Floyd protest. And, so the accessibility to lethal force in an emotional second is the difference between a fight and a death. And I think it's it's so critical, the distinction. And so unfortunately, a lot of what we're seeing in this country is not new. It's just that people are being enabled to take their irrational beliefs, and they've bubbled up above the surface. So everything that was just below the surface that looked civil wasn't actually civil. It was just masked very well. And there was a societal agreement about what you could do in public and what you can't. And of course, that has changed dramatically. And as everybody says, said so beautifully, is that yeah, if you take a gun that can shoot 500 people in a minute into a concert, then 500 people are going to die. And so to suggest that the weapons themselves or the types of weapons themselves don't matter is actually a falsehood. So I'm so glad we're talking about this.
And I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. It's your first time also being on the podcast. Accessibility to lethal force. I think that like hits the nail on the head, right? And today's discussion is going to be very interesting as we move into a local story here from Albuquerque that we'll talk about here in a minute. Let me go ahead and we'll play. And I didn't reach out to Al Sharpton because I got super busy. Also, I have rejectophobia, so I know that the answer is always no until you ask. But hey, Al Sharpton, if you watch this back, I would love to have you on the podcast sometime. We'll totally do that. But you look at these leaders who've been fighting the battle much longer than any of us have. Well, maybe not Rick. I mean, Rick earned all those gray hairs, but much longer than I have. But I hope, that these leaders who've been fighting for civil liberties, for justice for a lot longer than personally I have, will be able to know that it is in good hands as we move forward. Oh, and here comes Neil Daswani into the room as well. Neil is an amazing poet, so I'm glad that they're here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share this first clip. Let me tell you what it is, since some of you might be listening to this back. This is the Reverend Al Sharpton on gun violence and the Tally eulogy. eulogy. This is from the Buffalo News. I will say that the YouTube clips that we pick have nothing to do with necessarily with the posting entity, right? So this is not us necessarily endorsing or not endorsing the Buffalo News. So I don't want anyone to think like, oh, she is only playing, clips from this certain news media outlet. It's not like that. Okay, we're really looking for content here. This was originally posted. Does it give me the date? Let me see. It was originally posted May 27th, 2022, and it is only a minute and 15 seconds. And then we're going to go to the other post, which is CBS News. And this one is renewed call for police reform after. Oh, wait, no, wait. I'm not doing that one because we're gonna wait. We'll wait and do that one when we do our police brutality segment. So I just have this quick clip from Al Sharpton, and then we'll go into a discussion on the video, and then we will go ahead and begin to discuss what happened here in Albuquerque, and I'll show you the news clips from that. Very good to see you, Neil. Did you want to be a contributor today before we move forward, or are you just listening? You're muted though, so are you able to unmute? Will it let you? There we go.
It
Okay.
does. Thank you. Why don't I just listen for now?
Okay. Sounds good.
Talk a bit
Well,
later.
if you would like to chime in on any of the discussions, feel free to either unmute or raise your hand, all that good stuff. Okay. Otherwise, yeah, we'll just have everyone mute and I'll go ahead and share screen and we'll play this clip.
That before we could finish the funerals in Buffalo, you got 19 shot and killed with the same kind of weapons in Texas. And unless we start dealing with these easy access to guns, all of us are targets. It seems crazy that if you went in Texas to buy a beer, you got to prove you're 18 years old. But you can go buy an automatic rifle. That's how jaded we are. It seems jaded that this 18-year-old man could write a 180-page script and nobody in law enforcement even track where he's going. But we can find a brother in the streets in Buffalo just selling some weed.
And actually, I do want to play this other clip because we are discussing. It's so annoying when YouTube plays music while I'm talking. Here we go. So let me go ahead and pause. Off. Okay. So I am going to go ahead and play this clip since we are talking about calling 911 and meeting Al Sharpton, right? So I mean, it's impossible for us not to remember this story, but I'm gonna go ahead. Let me go ahead and share it, and then we'll discuss it because part of my white privilege is feeling confident growing up that if you call the police, they're going to show up and help, right? And that has not always been my personal experience. Whether I was trying to escape domestic violence, there was a fire in the building next to us. There was, someone trying to break into my home when I was in my 20s, which now I don't like when people knock on my door. I wrestled a gun away from a man I dated in college. There was a lot of things that in my past. and not all the time has it been positive. So when I heard this story, it just was really appalling to me. And we will be discussing this case again when we talk about the police brutality with as far as the gun violence goes later this year. But I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. This is a news article from CBS News. This was posted July 27th, 2024, and the title is "Renewed Call for Police Reform After Woman Who Called 911 Shot in Her Home." We'll remember this story, of course, the headlines last summer, but here we go. Let me share screen real quick.
This morning, there's renewed call for police reform after a deputy shot and killed an Illinois woman who called 911 about a possible intruder in her home. Vice President Kamala Harris spoke with Sonia Massey's family yesterday. The deputy, since fired, has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder charges. Roxana Saberi has more on the autopsy report and the deputy's checkered past, and a warning: some of the video is hard to watch.
The autopsy reveals the bullet hit Sonia Massey under her left eye, then exited from the back of her neck. After Sangamon County Sheriff's Deputy Sean Grayson and his partner responded to her 911 call.
Oh, it hurt you. You called us.
Body camera video reveals the moment Grayson shot the mother of two in the face after asking her to check the stove.
I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. No, I swear to God, I'll shoot you in your face. Okay, I'm sorry. Drop the pot! Drop the pot! Drop the
Massey's autopsy report lists gabapentin, a nerve pain medication, and THC, the active ingredient in cannabis. Ben Crump is an attorney for Massey's family.
The autopsy, there were no drugs in the system other than the medication.
This comes as CBS News has learned new details about Grayson, who worked for 6 different law enforcement agencies in 4 years.
The sheriff and I will not tolerate lying and deception.
New audio recordings from the Logan County, Illinois Sheriff's Office, obtained by CBS News, reveal Grayson was reprimanded in November 2022 for writing false information in his police reports.
7 months on, how are you still employed by us?
I don't know.
State records show Grayson resigned in April 2023 and was hired by Sangamon County 3 days later. And defense officials tell CBS News that in 2016, Grayson was discharged for misconduct from the Army after he was charged with driving under the influence of alcohol, one of 2 DUI charges on his record.
Why did he even have a job as a sheriff's deputy after those red flags?
Grayson was fired from the sheriff's office and has pleaded not guilty to the murder charges. When reached by CBS News, his attorney declined to comment. Rallies are planned here in Chicago and across the country over the next few days, calling for justice for Massey and other Black Americans killed by police. For CBS Saturday Morning, Roxana Saberi, Chicago.
So there's a lot, right? The news manages to pack a bunch into, a minute story. So many red flags there. And this is a systemic law enforcement issue. Now, I will say, right, we are not an anti-gun podcast. We're an anti-gun violence podcast. We are not anti-law enforcement. We're anti-out-of-control cops. There's a very big difference, okay? I have family in law enforcement. I have friends in law enforcement. And I will tell you, the first person to be pissed off at a corrupt cop is a cop, all right? And so we're not saying that we're anti-police. We're anti-police state, right? We're not saying we're we're anti law enforcement, but we're anti out of control cops. This is something that I don't blame departments for having shortages and needing staff, because people don't want to do the job. And why? Because cops are constantly targeted and killed and putting their lives at risk, right? We bury cops all the time. And that is like a most devastating thing when that happens. We've buried a lot of law enforcement in New Mexico, a lot, and it is an incredibly devastating thing. And so I don't want people to feel or think like we're attacking law enforcement. We're not attacking law enforcement. We're attacking police brutality. We're attacking out of control cops. That needs to change, because when you're in a system where someone can have a discharge from a military due to misconduct, go through 6 different police departments, and have a huge a litany of misconduct following him, there is a problem there. And you work for us. You are a public servant. You're paid from tax dollars. We are your bosses. You work for the community. Your whole job is to protect and serve. And so when this happens, when someone comes in, calls 911, and the police arrive, and she said, "Are you gonna kill me? Are you gonna hurt me?" Sonia Massey, she's a Black woman, and his white privilege, he said, "Well, why would we do that?" Right? And so the complete lack of recognizing as a law enforcement officer why people feel scared, why communities of colors feel afraid, right? Kellyanne touched on this a bit with, you know, where she's from and her sons, and I know that communities of color are scared everywhere, especially in places like Texas, right? And so we have to talk about, and I wish people would step up. I wish law enforcement would come up on the show here. I wish more people in government and in service positions would come up in this podcast and talk about it, because we're not out to get law enforcement, right? We rely on the good guys taking out the bad guys. That's kind of how it's supposed to be. But the good guys are supposed to be good guys, and they're not supposed to take out the good guys, right? Sonia Massey was needing help, and there was that was complete. And it, not just that. I mean, you look at Breonna Taylor, you look at all these other shooting deaths that we'll talk about more in depth in the podcast with law enforcement. But I don't know, like, I'll go ahead and go around the room and ask y'all, like, how you're feeling about this. What is your takeaway on this? And then we'll go into what the hell happened here in Albuquerque this week, because that is it's going to continue the discussion. Rick, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Well, I have all kinds of sympathy with concerns about law enforcement procedures and the cavalier nature that they employ their weapons of death. I have been a peace activist for 50 years, and yet I have been drawn on 3 different times by law enforcement who saw me through their psychological lens of being a threat. And thank goodness I have white privilege, so I had that going for me. Even though with long hair, I sort of had a 50% deduction rate on that. But I was visiting a friend, a new friend it turned out, and a police officer friend was coming to visit them. In fact, to meet with me as a tarot card reader, ironically enough, took one look at this long-haired guy and drew his weapon. There was no attempt to de-escalate. There was no, who are you? What are you doing here? Hey, you know, where's John and Mary? It was first, draw a weapon. Another time we had a robbery take place. We called the police, and I went out into the driveway and was waving my arms, hello, hello, you know, and of course they jumped out of the car and aimed their weapons at me. And it took another 10 minutes of talking. Again, thanks to white privilege, I wasn't shot on sight. But, you know, I understand we used to call them peace officers once upon a time. Protect and serve wasn't seen ironically as an afterthought at best. And it is something that they really need to be trained in de-escalation. And this idea that shoot first, aim for the head, aim for center mass, this is really a death sentence, and there's no judicial room for adjustment there. They're aiming for heads, they're aiming for hearts. And that needs to change. It really does.
It's so true. I mean, like, I love having Rick on this show because he always brings some humor to it. You know, it's really important that we have something positive, and we have these little positive inflections throughout the podcast because it is a very deep and dark topic. And so I appreciate you, Rick, for always bringing something that we can be a little jovial about. And I love it, right? I mean, if you want me to make you a shirt, I'll make you a custom shirt that says, 50% hippie privilege discount or something like, yes, let's go. I'll make you a shirt like that. It'd be awesome. But it's very true. We, you know, especially when you think about the 70s during Vietnam, and there was a great deal of brutality to the people who were anti-war back then, but those were in the form of beatings, not bullets. And it's very true that you are statistically less likely to be killed by a police officer if you're white. We know this in this country, but you know, that's for next time. All right, let's keep going. Harriet, would you like to reflect and chime in a little bit on the Al Sharpton video and the Sonia Massey video, and then we'll have Laura come up.
Well, let's see. Al Sharpton's lost a lot of weight, hasn't he?
Oh my God. And I put him in a poem. I'm
That was
looking
the first thing I noticed is like, my God,
it's like, yeah,
he's been around forever.
It's like Al Roker. We should have Al Roker and Al Sharpton. The Als. We'll have it.
The Als are losing weight. I should change my name so I could drop some weight.
Let's do Al about gun violence, and we'll invite Al Roker and Al Sharpton onto the show. I think that would be fabulous. All right.
There you go. Yeah, Al's, not AIAL. He's not wrong. I mean, you know, this the rules that there are not. Oops. Hang on a second. My phone is ringing. She did not get my message. Hold up. Can I give you 15? I'm in the middle of a podcast. Thank you, darling.
This is real life, you guys. This is real life. We're real people, and this is real life.
It's my regular 11 o'clock Saturday morning phone call. That's my heart sister up in Chama. Every Saturday, this is my lifeline. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, you know, the rules and regulations regarding certain things, you know, purchasing of guns, employment screenings, anybody, are so inconsistent. And I hate to say it, but there is a lot of white privilege in there. And don't get me started on a certain Tangerine Palpatine's BS about DEI being the evil that it isn't. That's a podcast for another day. Yeah, I see those snaps. Cat, get off my keyboard, you little brat. The culprit. But, you know, Al's right. You know, why is it that, you know, there's so many hoops to jump through for some things, and then somebody can just go boom, boom, and act on that impulse with no regulation, nobody stopping and saying, hey, wait, what do you really want this for? Why are you doing this? You know, even just we have to have a cool off period before abortions. Why can't we have a cool off period before buying a gun? You know, oh, wait, because it's a guy buying the gun. Pardon my patriarchy. I'm ranting, sorry. And as far as that guy in Illinois, talk about white privilege in action. That man should have never gotten hired on at the 3rd or 4th police department. There should have been red flags in his file, and those departments are not communicating with each other. We need a way to communicate these issues from department to department, to job. They do it for us civilians. Why can't they do it for public office like that, for public servants? You know, if I had, how long does it take for something like being let go to fall off of your record if somebody is looking into your job history.
Well, and that's a totally great point, right? And I know that at least in Albuquerque, we had the FBI come in and do the department evaluation, right, and made all these recommendations for our own police force.
Oh,
and
yeah.
one of them was to have civilian oversight. And I think that perhaps that needs to be something that is happening more. We talk about body cameras, and there was we lost Rick. Did he say he had to go, or did we lose him? We might have lost him. Oh no, he turned his camera off. Okay, sorry. Zoom is
he changed to his screenshot of his title.
Yeah.
And then in that, back to Albuquerque. What about this DWI scandal we've got going on with the police and such? They're not. They say, "Physician, heal thyself." Police yourselves.
It's so true, right? When people call 911, they expect to get a timely response to help you solve the problem and or to help negate the danger. That's the entire point, right? And so what it was tragic what happened to Sonia Massey, and I believe absolutely 1,000,000% her skin color played the role, because you can absolutely retreat from that stance. And to the merit of the local police department, since the FBI's evaluation, we have created a task force that goes in, not in uniform, not with guns,
police service aid thing,
intervene. No, it's not even the service aides. It's an entirely group. It's a group of workers that go in to intervene people who are either experiencing a crisis or mental health issues, or need things that are not escalated to having to have a uniformed armed police officer present. And those task force that go in and they help people on a person-to-person level without a gun, without a weapon, are seeing great success. Because when you're talking to someone who's in a mental health crisis, or who is experiencing a negative reaction to perhaps ingesting or taking some sort of drug or hallucinogenic, they are not in the right minds. They have a different capacity than someone who may be being sober. And Sonia Massey had nothing in her blood work except medications, and cannabis absolutely is a medication. It's a medication that helps many people, and it is not something that should be shamed or looked negatively at, like she's a criminal just because she had cannabis in her system. I mean, the woman had a nerve pain stuff, and so she was in a great deal of pain. The cannabis was helping manage her pain. That is not something that should be shamed or should be causal as an excuse on why she should be killed. It goes back to what Harriet was talking about, is how we cheapen life. So she had cannabis in her system, she had THC, okay, but that is for criminal. That doesn't mean she deserved to be shot, right? And there's a big difference, right? We have to start changing the mindset on deserving or minimizing the importance of someone's life. What she needed was help. She called because she needed help. What she needed was not white privileged police officers that are trigger hungry, who shouldn't have been in the job in the first place. That's what she didn't need. She didn't need to lose life over that. And I know that there's a lot of people who are discussing the same things that we're talking about now when Sonia Massey died, but I want to continue these discussions. It's important that we don't bury the discussion with the body. The discussion has to continue to live on. And that's, I'm hoping one of the things we can achieve with this podcast. But yeah, all right, let's keep going. Laura's here. I love when Laura Greville comes through, and she has a poem that she's going to share with us today as well, because she can't stay for the whole podcast. And then we're going to jump into the events that happened here in Albuquerque this week.
Thank you very much, Marissa. I'll just say very briefly something about the videos we saw, if that's all right. So people have been talking about Al Sharpton and the restrictions on gun purchase. And as a person, again, who grew up in an earlier time, born 1961 in the US, I've noticed that the rules for getting your driver's license have become more difficult. You have to have more supervised time. It's not like everybody can just, like when a kid is 16 or even 15, the parents sign a piece of paper and the kid drives their car away. And the same with alcohol consumption. When I grew up at 18, I could legally drink alcohol in the US. And within a few years, they changed it, although I was already 21 by then. And now in, I believe, the whole United States, you have to be 21 to drink alcohol. And the the irony of allowing people to get a gun when they're 18 but not drink alcohol until they're 21, it blows my mind. I just can't understand. There is no consistency in those kind of laws where they make it more restrictive for certain things that are very age related, and especially since the gun violence tends especially to occur in the teen ages and until, just, well, and the car driving, the reason insurance it costs more for boys between the age of 16 or 17 and 25 is because they have more accidents. And why is that not, that's the same thing with gun violence, that is more likely to occur in that age range. And why is that law not being changed? Also related to, mental health checks, and I know some states are doing that, but not all. And it should definitely be across the country that there are more checks and more waiting time to buy weapons. And I believe certain kinds of automatic weapons, which used to be illegal in the US, should again be illegal. And then about the police brutality and police incidences, I will just say that in Austin, Texas, during the Black Lives Matter protests, Austin, which is a city that has a reputation for being very progressive and open-minded at this point, had a disturbing number of police brutality instances that were very upsetting. And yes, I mean, I saw videos of some people of color and also white people being attacked by the police. Who these people were peaceably there, and this was happening, and I was very upset by that Austin, the police were no different from other places and could be worse. At least these policemen who did this. So now I want to read a poem that is related to fear, because that, along with gun ownership, has risen, as far as I can tell, in the US since I was young, because I did not, and again, I'm a white person. I did grow up in the city, in the center of the city, very central. And I just, I can understand that people of color could have been frightened where I wouldn't have been in certain instances. But now it seems like everyone is frightened, and everyone thinks that too many people think that buying a gun will help decrease their fear, which makes no sense to me. There's no logic in it. You're more likely to be injured by a gun if you own one and it's in your house. So I will read a poem that was inspired partly by that and partly by the fear which I saw rise in the people when I would go back to visit the US in the last 25 years. This is called Down Under. Fear, oh fear, the beginning of an unraveling, the pulling us down under. Can you put your finger on the moment when something went awry? Was it the day the cat died, when the road turned dustier, when the cock crowed thrice, when the child was told things are scarier than this time last year? I grew up not afraid, but something turned me on my ear. I used to ride my bike on beloved black summer nights. We'd ride to Amy's ice cream and stand in line, t-shirts and mini skirts at Sweet Attention, bare legs pumping home in velvet air. Sleep came easy with the sound of fans, pulling in the outside wind, the movement a stream that carried us on, down under, to the planet's sublime, where no time exists. When did time begin ticking? The unraveling as we rappelled down the cliff till the rope went stiff. Did it start in Colleen, the Luby's shooting by a merchant marine? No one understood why he'd drive his truck through a wall, pull out that gun to shoot us all. Was he afraid of something? did he never learn to crawl? Fear, oh fear, the beginning, the middle, the end of an unraveling. When did you ride up fear? Did you park your bike at the curb next to mine? Did you eat your tacos with cheese and lime? Fear, oh fear, you could have been swept in with the shinier life that tempted us, or with the letting go of hope, pulling us down under plunder where the leeches win, into the muck and the leaves and the mud of the creek's den, into the lack of freedom that chains our wonder with a padlock called fear. Maybe there's a way to knit an opening to catch the threads that hang loose over the pier, to sew these shadows back onto our own bodies. Thank you.
Ooh, padlock called fear. And I think that you hit it again, the nail on the head. I think that it's really, people are just very scared. It goes back to, if you got to go to Walmart with AK-47, I think part of that is privilege, ego. You got a tiny little woohoo, and you're scared as shit. So at the core of it, I think that, it just is a matter of lay down your weapons and open your minds, right? Be part of the solution. And I don't think that more guns is the solution. I don't think arming everyone is the solution. And we'll talk about that as we move into the Albuquerque thing. But before we do that, I'm going to have Kellyanne go ahead and reflect a little bit. And thank you so much, Laura, for that. I know you have to go, but Laura, do you want to plug yourself, your platform, or anything that you have going on? And if not, that's okay too.
I'm working on a collection. So in the future, I will have a collection, as I said, I'm an immigrant. I've lived in 5 different countries, and that's really the general theme, and that immigrants are not evil either.
Oh my gosh, that part.
Immigrants can come from all over the world. They move for jobs, they move because of war, famine, oppression, and immigrants are okay people, and I can tell you, as a person of privilege, education, white, that it's not easy for me, and it's been very difficult. And so I hope that my book will put that out there, that it's difficult. If it's difficult for me, think of how it's difficult for other people, and maybe people will open up, because I have had immigrants from other places assist me in different places, and I ask them often first, and they are so kind, even though they may have very little. So yes, thank you so much. And I'm doing an Open Minds feature on April 11th, and that is out of Canada, and it starts European time about 1 a.m. So I will be trying to stay awake. And so that's Open Minds, open mic, if people are interested in that.
And that
April
is a
11th.
wonderful place. Open Minds, open mic. And what's the date again?
April 11th.
All right. Yeah, definitely send the details, and we're happy to support and share. And we've published poets from all over the world, and we've published in many different languages. It's an incredible thing. In fact, I was reflecting during the war in Gaza, because we have published Jewish poets, and we've also published poets from Lebanon. And in fact, it was interesting the other day. I heard from my Lebanese poet, because I was very concerned for their safety and making sure that, everything that was happening in there. It's not that the area is not new to war, right? But they have since moved to Canada with their family, and finished their education and everything. And so it's very exciting. And we're getting ready to publish another Canadian poet. And so I'm thinking we're going to need to do something in Toronto. We're going to be doing an event, hopefully next year in Toronto, it's going to be fun. But I thank you so much. And you bring, Laura, a perspective that not a lot of people bring because you have lived all over. And I will say that the United States is a country built on immigrants and thieves, right? You were either born here and your land was stolen, or you were brought here due to some sort of distress within the world. Personally, I am part Cherokee and part Italian American immigrant. And so this country was founded and built off of people trying to escape persecution, to escape war, trying to survive, give their children and the future a better chance to live and have a better life. I think that's what we all want at the end of the day. And they're not the persecution of immigrants in this country is just, it's appalling because people forget where they come from. And we should be a destination and a haven for those seeking to survive. Apparently, those who think otherwise have never fought for their life. But that's a different. We should do a DEI podcast, Harriet. All right, yeah, we could bring a bunch of. And I posted the other day. I was like, look, if you are rolling back your DEI principles, or you want to support a company that's rolling back their DEI principles, you have to realize it's very simple. Unless you're a cisgender white man, your job and livelihood are at risk. That's it. It's not that hard. All right, let's go. I'm gonna let Kellyanne go ahead and reflect. Thank you so much, Laura, for your contributions today. And if you stay, feel free to stay. I'm not kicking you out. But if you stay as long as you want and participate as long as you want today, and we'd love to have you. All right, Kellyanne.
Thank you so much. Yes, and what a wonderful poem. Thank you, Laura. I'm definitely looking forward to checking out your work when it's published. I just wanted to say something about like what Richard had said about understanding de-escalation, and I'm dropping something in chat. Whoops, let's see if it entered. No, it didn't. Hang on one second. And then I would invite everybody to check out Campaign Zero's 8 Can't Wait. And it basically, and I'm just going to read it off, it basically is something that you can share with your city council to make recommendations for its police force to adopt these practices, which is banning chokeholds and strangleholds, requiring de-escalation, which, believe it or not, in most places around the country is not required. Requiring warning before deadly force, that's also not required in many places, and requires exhausting all alternatives, say that 5 times fast, before deadly force. Duty to intervene, ban shootings at moving vehicles, require use of force continuum, and require comprehensive reporting. These are things that are not universally universal practices or requirements in police departments across the country. And so really simple way to help ensure that in your community that these things happen is go to your city council meetings and or whatever structure your city or township is, and recommend that they check them out and try to bring them into the fold of their practices. And we have seen, and I think Al Sharpton so eloquently put the crisis that we're having here, and I think everyone recognizes that something has to change. So yeah.
I always say, if you change nothing, nothing will change. Right? It's to keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid simple, right? That's it. And these are not difficult concepts. So clearly we got to change something. Because if gun violence has not affected you, it's just a matter of time. All right. So going into this story that happened in Albuquerque, it was not originally on the docket for today, but I felt it was so controversial and so devastating that it had to be brought up today. So I'll give you a little bit of a backstory on what happened, and then I have two news clips, local news clips on this. So a husband and wife were sitting in their car. This is from what I understand from the news reports. Okay, this is all only from the news that we have watched so far. Husband and wife in their vehicle, and they were approached by a young man with a gun who was trying to rob the woman. The woman was she received, I believe she received a gunshot wound. The husband had a firearm. In New Mexico, your car is an extension of your home. So you can have a gun in your vehicle in New Mexico. And the husband discharged his weapon, his gun, and shot the kid, and the boy died. There were, I believe, 7 teens involved in this incident, all males, and ranging from 12 years old to 17. This is devastating because it affects a great deal of children and minors, and it is a symptom of a larger issue within New Mexico. And I believe it's not just New Mexico, it's everywhere. But we are a border state. We have a great deal of guns, drugs, and people moving through this state. We have lax laws on minors. We have an overworked detention center, overworked judicial system, lax judges who rotate criminals back out onto the street. And then there's not enough law enforcement that are equipped to handle dangerous criminals. So much so that the rest of us, when crap happens to the rest of us, like when my house got shot up and 5 9mm rounds went in the side of my house, I still never talked to a detective. No one has ever come to knock on my door to talk about it. So, like, what are we all supposed to do when you got teens on the street packing, carrying guns, and brazen enough to go up to a car and try to rob the person? Last year at the gym, we had lots of cars, windows busted out, people looking for weapons and guns and vehicles. So this is a huge crisis because, yes, it's considered quote unquote a justifiable homicide, right? Because he was protecting his, if it was me and I had a gun, I'd return fire fucking too. But I'm sure that man didn't want to use his gun, never planned to use his gun. I don't know what his background is with guns. I don't know anything about this particular shooter, the man, but he was firing back because his life was clearly in danger. His wife's life was clearly in danger. He was protecting himself, his wife, in the vehicle, which is a diminished response environment. You don't have the upper hand inside of a vehicle. And I'm sure that this man never intended to shoot and kill a child. I'm sure he never intended to shoot and kill anyone. But when you own a gun, that's the responsibility you carry. That either someone shoots and kills you, someone you love, or you shoot and kill someone else. That's the responsibility. That is the gravity of owning a gun, right? And so is the solution. This, to me, it kind of emboldens everyone to now have a gun in their car. Oh my God, it could happen to me. My skirt was too short again, right? This is the symptom of a larger issue, right? Do we all just pack heat? Are we going back to the wild, wild west of sidearms? Or is perhaps fixing the problem of why these teens were on the street, how they all freaking had guns, why some of them had criminal records, why they were emboldened enough in the first place to do this? Because law enforcement perhaps is not acting, or the judicial system is not intervening. So those are all things to think about as we watch these two clips. All right. So I'm going to share screen. The first clip is from KOB4 here in Albuquerque. It was posted 1 day ago, and the title on YouTube is 17s arrested in deadly attempted robbery shooting. The second video we're going to watch is from KRQE 13 here in Albuquerque. It was again posted 1 day ago, and it is titled Bernalillo County DA Speaks Out on Teens Charged in Attempted Robbery Shooting. And so all of those things I want you to kind of think about as we watch these two news clips, and we'll come back and we'll discuss them here as a panel. So let me share screen.
Now at 6, the lives of not one, but 8 local teens forever changed in just minutes. One of them is dead. 7 are now in custody for a very violent attempted armed robbery. And listen, we hear it too. The broken record, more teens committing violent crimes.
And the governor's office hears it as well. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham held a public safety roundtable earlier this week to talk about that very subject of juvenile crime.
And it turns out it's been on their radar for years, but for the last 8 months, they say they've wanted to track data and trends.
Our Felice Romero joins us now. So Felice, we're talking about a group of teens who allegedly targeted a couple at a local apartment complex.
Yeah, Trevor, Tessa, this started when 14-year-old named Alonso Sanderson and his 15-year-old friend Jariah Salas were in a car with a group of teens and decided to rob a couple in a Jeep. Now, this is really troubling because the whole thing was a large group of teens ranging from 12 to 17 years old. They were armed and scouting for people to rob. Lawmakers say when you're talking about teen gun violence, it's all about the balance between accountability and rehabilitation.
It was this apartment complex police say Alonso Sanderson and Jariah Salas allegedly decided to try and rob a couple in a blue Jeep. Court records show Sanderson pulled up on the passenger side armed with 2 guns, and Salas opened the rear passenger door with another gun.
They actually shoot guns into a car. 3 bullets go into the passenger of that car. The 14-year-old's dead because the driver of that vehicle shot back and shot and killed that 14-year-old. This is too much. Enough is enough.
Police say the driver was trying to protect his wife when he fired his gun, killing 14-year-old Sanderson. He was able to get his wife to the hospital where she was treated for 2 gunshot wounds. All 7 teens are now in custody. Bernalillo County District Attorney Sam Bregman says for some, it wasn't their first run-in with the law.
This is exactly the kind of situation. 4 of these 8 kids have criminal history, and they've already been in the criminal justice system. One of them as young as 10 years old.
Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham says the age of these offenders adds another layer to this complex issue, finding the balance between consequences and rehabilitation.
No detention means we have more juvenile crime. Now we have life in prison when they're 18. Too many consequences, no restoration means that we're creating more criminal behaviors in that soon-to-be released adult.
Now, when it comes to this case, APD is investigating the death as a justifiable homicide since the husband of the victim was defending his wife and himself during the attempted armed robbery. Tessa, Trevor.
I'm so tired. Okay, I'm going to play the second video for you because it's a follow-up kind of a little bit later. You know, when stories first break, there's always, you know, a little bit more research that's been done and a little more reflection. And so the second news clip is following up to this first video.
Learning more about the teens involved in the botched robbery that left one of them dead and 6 others now arrested.
Some of them have a criminal history, including the one who died. News 13's Gabe Chavez is live outside APD tonight with that story.
Well, Dean and Jess, the district attorney's office says half the teens involved in yesterday's incident have a criminal background. And the DA saying this is a disturbing trend and that enough is enough.
This is horrific. This has got to end. Enough's enough.
Another case of teens breaking the law, this time one left dead. Police say on Wednesday, a group of 8 teens tried to rob a couple while they sat in their Jeep at an apartment complex off of Tramway north of I-40. They say one of the suspects, 15-year-old Jariah Salas, along with 14-year-old suspect Alonso Sanderson, shot the woman in the passenger seat of the Jeep. The woman's husband shot back at the teen several times, striking Alonso, killing him, and grazing 15-year-old Janaya Pino. The woman who was shot is expected to be okay. Police confirming to us today that Alonso went missing back in 2022. APD say they have arrested all 7 teens involved in the botched robbery.
Well, I can tell you this, 7 arrest warrants were issued for the 8 kids. The only reason the 8th didn't get one is because he's dead.
The teens, 16-year-old Jocelyn Pino, 14-year-old Elijah Gutierrez, 12-year-old Jathan Gutierrez, 17-year-old Vicente Pino, 15-year-old Janaya Pino, 13-year-old Levi Salas, and 15-year-old Jariah Salas.
This is really out of control. I don't know whether or not all the parents were involved in it, but I can tell you this, some of them will be named in our petitions that we file.
Some of the teens have a criminal record. APD say Alonzo had an extensive record with the department. We told you about Jariah Salas back in 2022 when he was arrested for robberies he's accused of committing with his uncle. The DA calling on the legislature to act.
Kids need to get consequences when they first see the criminal justice system. It's very, very important that we just don't put them on probation, slap them on the hand and say, don't worry about it, and give you a hug.
APD says that 2 of the teens turned themselves in today, and the other 5 were taken in yesterday. Back to you.
All right, Gabe, thank you. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham says tackling juvenile crime is a major focus this legislative session, and she's asking lawmakers to increase penalties.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. And as I lead us into our discussion, I do want to say that this happened a few miles from my home. Okay. And so this is like when I say that these things happen, it affects us as artists, as poets, as performers, as human beings. As a mother, it affects me deeply. But this happened near my house, near my home, in a city I love, in a city I'm born and raised in, with kids, like some things. And I'm going to invite Sam Bregman to come on the podcast and say, come and talk to us. You know, he is the district attorney of Bernalillo County. It's the county we live in here in New Mexico. When he says enough is enough, you know, there's all the DA, law enforcement, and then the judicial system have to work in this symbiotic relationship. And if they're not all firing on all cylinders at the same time, a lot of things are going to get missed. And I think it's so important to recognize the flaws in our system because a child died here, and it could have been a lot worse. The wife and the husband could have been killed as well. There could have been more deaths here. And what's so dangerous to me is that of the 8 teens, right, there was 8 total teens involved in this, 7 of which have been arrested because, of course, 1 died. Half of those teens, ranging from 12 to 17, half of those have a criminal history already in the criminal justice system. And one of them started in the criminal justice system at the age of 10. Does this not blow anyone else's mind? Does this not hurt anyone else's heart? As a mother, I'm appalled and I'm stunned, and I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken because they said that Jariah was involved in a robbery with his uncle. That these are family members pulling these children into the criminal life. And this is not anything new, right? This is, again, we know kids have been turning drugs, they've been turning people, they've been turning weapons for a long time in different neighborhoods and in different communities. We know this. But how do we begin to solve this? How do we recognize it's happening and this is bad? And the other thing that kind of struck me, and I don't know why this happened, but the only one photograph that the news portrayed was of a child of color. Like, none of the other children's photographs were shown. And is it because they didn't have access to them? But if half of them have mugshots, how come there was only one child of color that was shown, their picture was shown in the news report? Are we continuing to stigmatize and criminalize children of color? Right? Are we going to dismiss the importance of their life because they're not a white child? And so that, that is a question for the news organization to answer on. I would like to know what that answer is. The DA said parents will be named in the petition. Is that a solution? Right? How do we do this? Is early intervention a solution? What are we doing to rehabilitate? They need consequences. And then the governor says juvenile crime is a major focus of this year's legislative session. So what causes juvenile crime? Is it poverty? Is it access to weapons? Is it the lackadaisical judicial system and law enforcement officers who are just tired of picking up kids? Like, where's the problem? Because I think the juvenile crime is a symptom. I think it's a symptom of much bigger problem. Is it because the parents are on drugs? Is this a drug? Is this a substance abuse issue? Is it a mental health issue? Is it a poverty issue? Is it an educational issue? Right? So what is the root cause of what's happening here, and how do we fix it so that we're not having to bury any more kids in New Mexico? So I'm going to turn it over to the floor. You're welcome to dialogue with each other, or you're welcome to go one at a time, and I will step back and enjoy the conversation. Of course, Rick will go ahead and open with your thoughts. You're muted though. This is a real show, people.
Well, first, I really want to say again, for those who might think of this as a anti-gun, anti-cop, liberal diatribe, I think it shows a very good sign that you're prepared to discuss all of the ramifications of this and not simply blame ham-handed law enforcement. You ask a real serious question: what the heck is going on with kids committing this kind of violence? And we all know, I think, or at least suspect, that it's a complicated problem. Part of it is resources, part of it's education, part of it's parental upbringing or lack of. We do know one thing, that a rich, stimulating home environment in all the different colors and ways that that might be gives kids alternative ways of solving problems. When you have a limited set of solving problems, you're going to use that limited set of tools. If you have a complex set of options, if you're ingrained with culture, if you understand the different ways that people deal with stress, if you have educational and employment options, there's a less reduced chance of you turning to violence to solve problems or to get resources. And it's a complex problem. It needs complex solutions. But I think we're wise to think of how we can provide kids alternative ways of thinking so that they have more options than simply, well, let's go rob somebody.
I love that, alternative ways of thinking. I mean, so one of the things that I've learned over the years as a publisher is that most of the people who I've published have started writing in their teens, and usually in school, or the result of an English class or a teacher or a book that they just happened to read. And I should have pulled up the news clip. I don't remember exactly where I heard it, but it says something like, children need to get back to reading because instead of screen time, because it helps the mind with imagination and with critical thinking, or with the thought process, or just kind of going into that other world that books provide. And poetry helps you learn how to express yourself with words. It helps you identify what you're feeling, what you're going through, and it helps validate other people. If you go to a poetry open mic or you go to a show, you will hear things from someone that will have an impact on you. And that is critical for young people, to feel like they're not alone, to be influenced by the right things. Because I guarantee you, the 12-year-old who was involved in the shooting was just following the crowd. I guarantee you they didn't want to be taken away from their parents. And if they did, if their life was so tragic at 10 because of abuse or neglect or violence in the home, which is a valid thing, and it does happen to a great deal of children, okay, then that child should have been removed and have a safe place to be. There should be programs for children to be able to learn about how to regulate emotions, how to talk about emotions, and have trusted adults in their life that can receive that information so children can reach out. When a gun is more accessible than a pen, how is a child supposed to express themselves when everyone around them is carrying a gun too? It's just a devastating thing. So yeah. Rick, did you have anything else before I move to Harriet?
No, I like I said, I really wanted to say we need to make sure, insofar as is possible, and changing our whole society to fix the problem is not an afternoon's effort, but we really need to give kids options, and it's part of its education, part of its parenting, part of it is resources in the community. If the kid has no place to go, there's no playgrounds, there's no gaming, there's no training, there's no resources, well, then they're going to find what every juvenile delinquent has found since Babylon and before. They're going to go make trouble. And we all know it. No, no matter how elevated and cultural we are, we've all had our little brushes of if not crime, near crime, I'm going to call it, when we were children. But we made the choice to not go that way, to not put our liberty at risk, not to put other lives at risk. And that's an intelligent choice. But unfortunately, we know that some children have never been appraised of an intelligent choice.
Raising two daughters, I always said in the back of my mind, if I don't sell to my kids, then the drug dealer down the street will. They'll sell ideas, right? If they're not selling drugs and guns, they're selling ideas. And the root of the inclusivity or the family of having being part of something like an organization where you're shown respect, where you're shown importance, where you're validated for being someone. And if you're starving for that as a young person because home is violent, dangerous, abusive, neglectful, you will go and buy the ideas of the group that accepts you. I mean, we know this. We've known this for a really long time. This is nothing new. So I feel like when Sam Bregman said that the parents will be named in the petitions, I am like all for that, because the family, I mean, anyone can be a parent, right? There's no handbook or manual you get when you become a parent, and there's no screening process for it. There's no background check on being a parent like there's in some states on guns. But certainly it is your responsibility to make sure that they're safe and that they're healthy and that they're loved. And that does not always happen for children, especially in New Mexico. Harriet, would you like to weigh in on the shooting from this week?
Sure. Let me pop in here. One thing I did notice when they were mentioning the names, it looks like there's some sibling groups in there, and that makes me really wonder what's going on in those families where more than one child, like 2 or 3 siblings and or cousins, it's a systematic familial thing, it sounds like. But speaking for myself, I grew up with domestic violence. My dad was a piece of work, shall we say. And thank God for my mom, because she kept me from going down the wrong path. It could have been so easy, except that I lived 1.5 miles outside of town and couldn't get anywhere. I had nobody to run with, thank goodness. But a lot of the time, kids aren't even aware of other options. They're not exposed to it. They don't see it on TV. They don't read it in books. They have no clue. They're in this isolated little bubble of, this is my life. This is all I know. What is there beyond this? Is there anything beyond this? And I think that's a disservice that our communities, as well as parents, are doing to the kids. They're not getting exposed to things. Schools are so underfunded. They're not able to bring in, poets or musicians. The arts are the first to go when the budget cuts come along. I remember our band boosters group put together bingo games to save the band for my high school. because, I mean, hello, Reaganomics, everything was getting cut. And we managed to do it, but only because people saw the need, saw a solution, and cared enough to do something about it. A lot of people right now are so scared and so fatigued and so just utterly beaten down and worn out that we can't see options. Everybody talks about, oh, well, we should be doing this, should be doing that. What part are you doing? What are you doing to make this possible? Have you gone out? Have you looked at what your school's budget is? You know, everybody's like, oh, motivational speakers and this, that, and the other. It's like, yeah, the DARE program didn't work either. Takes more than that.
Well, and we know that just allowed a bunch of people of color to be incarcerated for very minor drug offenses for the span of 20 some years. Plus, some of them were incarcerated and couldn't make bail. So they were unjustly detained without even being guilty of anything.
And don't get me started on, you know, current trends in Mississippi. They're talking about, you know, taking all the people of color and it's like, hey, look, free labor.
Yeah, I mean,
incarcerate them and put them to work.
You're kind of the cog in the system, right? And I think, you know, we have to ask ourselves, are we being complacent with the violence?
And I think a lot of it is we're not so much complacent, but it's compassion fatigue. It hits. We don't have time to react. We don't have time to come up with a solution in between because here comes the next incident down the way. Speaking from a neurobiology point, when you are in fight or flight or you're getting those adrenaline hits so often, this is what puts your body into a constant survival mode. When you're in survival mode, you can't think beyond surviving the next incident that you know is coming. And this is the root. We as a society, I think, have chronic PTSD forming because we are so traumatized. It's happening on and on and on. We don't have time to react. We don't know how to react. And by the time we get a chance to breathe, here comes the next incident down the pike.
Absolutely. I love that you say compassion fatigue. Again, it kind of goes back to what you were saying in the very beginning. How are we lessening the importance or the validity of a human life? And when you're constantly berated with information that is, you know, violence, if it bleeds, it leads, right? You know, gun violence, children die at school, this person died, this person got shot, this, you know, there's all these things happening. It makes it very, very difficult to pick out like what really happened or this again. And it's very true. We're all sick and tired of having to continue to hear about this. We're sick and tired of poets and performers and artists having to create artwork to battle this. It's an exhausting thing to have to continue discussing gun violence.
And I can only imagine, because of my place in white settler privilege, I can only imagine what kind of messages children of color, of any color, are being barraged with and are having thrown at them silently, even.
Well, I know many of my friends who are raising children, many of my Black friends, the first thing that they do is teach your child how to respond when they're approached by a law enforcement officer or pulled over by a law enforcement officer. Having your hands visible at all times, making slow movements, listening. I mean, this is not something that white kids in America are learning in driver's ed.
No, it's not. But it's starting to make its way into white spaces now.
And is it going to matter then? And if it matters then, how much is it going to matter for people to take action, right? And we're not saying that white kids don't get shot by cops because they do. We're not saying white people don't get shot by cops because they do. They just don't get shot and killed or targeted at the rate of our counterparts, the people of color. And so, you know, like, I don't have to worry. And I tell my girls, they're white, they're educated, and they're pretty. I tell them
That helps.
they have a leg up when they get pulled over, because the cop is going to be disarmed that they're a woman, that they're white, and that they're pretty. But still, this is how you need to behave, because there's a lot of trigger hungry men out there, and there's a lot of men who hunt pretty white girls.
Uh-huh.
And so when we're talking about how to be safe as a female in society, that is a discussion, but they're still never going to have to be as concerned or as on guard as a Black, attractive, educated woman. And I can say that because I've published many, and I know many, and I love many, and I understand that through the conversations and through their artwork, the struggle that they have. And continuing the discussion of gun violence around people of color is something that we're going to be tackling this year. Specifically on this event, I also, and Kellyanne will have you comment, I want you to think about, because I want to talk about justifiable homicide by gun. And does this embolden you or not? Maybe you, maybe not you. Do you think it emboldens society to now go buy a gun? If they were looking for an excuse to go buy a gun, this is the perfect excuse to go buy a gun, right? And to me personally, as a woman, it's kind of like being told your skirt is too short. Well, how about you stop raping women? It's not my skirt, but it's not too short. How about you just stop raping women, right? So I don't think that the answer is everyone needs to buy a gun. How about we just not shoot people? How about we just don't have armed robberies from kids that are 12 years old? Anyways, I have not had a lot of time to digest this yet, and I'm still kind of like passionate about it. But let's go ahead. We'll open it up to Kellyanne, and if Neil, if you want to chime in or anything, you're welcome to, and if not, you're welcome to just observe. And I'm really glad you're here too.
Yeah, great. So yeah, some of the things that came up for me is after World War II, my grandfather served, and so they moved to the suburbs. So I grew up in the suburbs. I still have family in the inner city of Los Angeles. And the outcome for my family, the Mexican American side of my family, living in inner city is vastly different. So the impact, the socioeconomic impact of the outcomes for young people, played out in my own family. And when I was in junior high school and high school, I had a really good friend who was in a gang. And in 8th grade, her boyfriend died cleaning his gun. And just seeing the differences in outlook, right? I went to school with kids that knew from the day they were little that they were going to go to college. I didn't know that. That was not, that was not part of my experience. But they knew they were going to go to college. And what I do know about people, especially within the inner city, or people that have gotten involved in gangs, is that if you live in if the water that you swim in is surrounded by people that hate you, that don't want to give you a job, that want you to leave your backpack at the front when you go buy a soda and chips, and that's every single day, everywhere you go. It is not surprising what the outcome is when the most successful person in town is the local drug dealer, right? And so it's a different form of oppression. It's oppression within oppression. And so having stronger consequences is not the answer, sure, you can, and part of the problem that gets some of the young people into these, long records is broken windows policing, where they get picked up and charged with almost anything, just because they're black or brown. And I obviously people wielding guns or committing crimes, there needs to be consequences. I'm not against that, but it's not the solution. Like the underlying solution is the dismantling of systemic oppression. And, above and beyond just the idea of poverty itself is the systemic oppression. And that is, sort of what came up for me. And, it is heartbreaking. They mentioned in one of the newscasts that the kid that fired the gun had been missing for 2 years, is what they said, which meant that kid was living on the streets. And you think about the opioid crisis and the fentanyl crisis that's happening, and, what would drive a kid he would have been 12 at the time, to prefer living on the streets than going home. And I think that speaks bigger volumes than anything I can say.
It's so true, right? And like Harriet said, some of my childhood was very tumultuous, and I did run away as a child to get out of violence in the home. And I'm really glad that I was able to get supported during that time of my life, because I almost didn't survive my childhood. And I see a lot of those traits in my oldest, even though she doesn't experience violence in the home. She definitely tests the waters with rules in the home. And in fact, just yesterday, one of her friends' mothers reached out to me because her daughter took off. And in this city, when you're a 14, 15-year-old girl and you leave home, it's incredibly dangerous. And so, what is happening that's so bad at home that you want to leave? And it goes back to, right, like they said, Jariah started performing robberies with his uncle, right? And so when you have a trusted adult, or you grow up in the environment of crime, uh-oh, my Chromebook says, okay, sorry, my Chromebook says it was like not working. But anyways, when you grow up in the environment of crime, and that's all you know, it's kind of like growing up in the environment of love. That's all you know. It's normal. You don't realize that it's not okay, that it's not normal, that it's not healthy. You don't realize that certain things in the home are bad until you go to someone else's home and it's different, right? I remember going to other kids' homes as a child and being like, wow, this is totally different than my life. It's like why we travel. We go to other countries. We see the way other people live, the other cultures, other religions, other foods, other transport modes of transportation. You experience the world because it's very different from yours. But when you grow up in a life of crime with adults that you've known your whole life, that they're supposed to, you naturally trust because you're a child. How in the world are you supposed to know any different? And then you get involved in a gang or a community of your peers, right? And they start giving you a purpose, and they start showing you love and respect, and they start giving you prestige and accomplishments and all that stuff. You're fine, Issa. And it's so much better than your home life. What wouldn't you do, right? And that is part of the discussion today, with the gravity. Where does everyone stand on the justifiable homicide aspect of this story? I mean, we talked about the tragedy of it being kids, and perhaps the system and a family failing them. But how do we feel on the justifiable homicide, right? If I was that wife and it was my husband, I would say him or me, it's going to be him all day, every day, right? Because that's the part of surviving as a human being. And I don't think that this man ever wanted to kill a child. No one ever wants to kill a child, I don't think. But it is the responsibility that you own as a gun owner. So where does everyone sit on the fact of justifiable homicide? Do you think that this is, is this solution is more guns, or how is this going to impact things moving forward? All of that good stuff. So I'll turn it over to Rick.
Well, first thing I have to say is I think it's a biological condition that you want to protect yourself. And for most, I won't say all, but for most, protecting one's loved ones is right there, number two. And so I know I would do everything I could to protect my loved ones. And while the realm of possibility exists that it would include the option of taking another life, I think you pick the tools that you use to do that protection. Maybe it's your wits, maybe it's your vehicle. It would not be my first choice, although it's not true for everyone, certainly, to choose to take someone else's life. That would be way down on my decision tree. So I understand the necessity, I understand the biological obviousness of it, but it would be far from my first choice, sure.
And that's very true. I mean, especially once you become a parent. Like, I'll tell you what, I will throw myself in front of a bus for my kids, in a way that is so profoundly different than before I had kids. I take a lot less risks now that I'm a parent, and I fight a lot more ferociously, just instinctually as a mother. And I have to wonder, where are the parents? Where are the family members? Somebody loves these kids, whether it's a grandparent or a teacher. Where are the teachers? Like, what has not happened in the lives of these young people? I mean, my youngest is 10. She's in 5th grade, and to have a juvenile record at 10. Where did the system fail these young people? I think a lot about that. Anyways, let's keep going. So, justifiable homicide. How do we think moving forward as an adult? Like, Harriet, what are your reflections here?
It's such a tricky phrase, justifiable. Understandable. I mean, yeah, justifiable under the law because it is self-defense, but it's also very regrettable. This fella is going to have to live with the consequences of what he did as well. And I don't think that's been thought of. He's going to be grieving in a way too. Maybe not for the child, but for the loss of, detachment. He's involved now. He is a statistic. You can't, I wouldn't charge him with murder or anything like that. Legally justifiable homicide is the only option they've got. But, his life is forever changed. His wife's life is forever changed. The law was written in a simpler time. There are not things that cover exact specifics of what happens in a human life. This is the best we can do. And he's probably going to be, living with some degree of guilt for the rest of his life, but in the heat of the moment, as the phrase goes, that animal instinct kicks in. Survival.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Survival, defend mine and my own. And I don't think he could have done anything else slamming the Jeep into reverse and backing the heck out of there would not have been enough. They would have still kept shooting. As far as I can see, this was the only course he had. And if he hadn't done it, there'd probably be 3 dead bodies in that driveway.
And it's really hard to pause it and to imagine the way we would respond in those situations, because I've never been in that situation where I've had to return fire on a child. So I cannot say how I would personally react. But I think that if you're a gun owner, then you need to be able to own the responsibility of having to shoot anyone, whether they're a child, whether they're a woman, whether they're a man, whether they're old or
And
young.
that is part of the responsibility of being a gun owner and user.
And it's so much trauma. I mean, imagine the news story it's so new still, right? That they didn't even report on the trauma, but imagine firing on that child and then watching him die. And you have blood, you have smells, you have the fallout of the law enforcement, medical examiners, investigations, interviews. You have the fallout of 12 hours of being interviewed, forensics, being swabbed. I mean, you're talking about the fallout, watching this kid bleed out and die, because that's what
not how he
do.
planned his evening to go.
The trauma, right? And then you have to consider the trauma of the first responders who arrived on the scene, the trauma of law enforcement. Imagine the fear of law enforcement hearing shots fired. There's 7 guns or 8, 18s, and then this couple that you have all responding to this call, that there's guns, there's active shooting, there's people who've been hit. You already know it's a hot situation that you're approaching in, right? And then have to call the death of a child, and then the coroner, right, the medical examiner, having to perform the autopsy on a child, and then to have to be the law enforcement officer to deliver the news to the family, right? There's so much more than the fact that someone just shot someone else. I mean, the fallout of the trauma, the ripple effect of how this affects everybody in the community. And then the kids who survived, having some of them
watch their friend, their brother, their cousin there.
I mean, they're all in jail now. Thankfully, all safely.
There ain't much counseling in jail, I gotta tell you.
Right. And so how do we work that rehabilitation? What did he say? Sam Bregman said, lower detention rates equal higher crime equals more time served when they're 18 years old. And if you can't get out of the cycle, how do we affect the change? Anyway, so I'm going to let Kellyanne chime in on this discussion on, stand your ground, the justifiable homicide, the fallout on the adult side, on the survivor side. I don't like to use the word victim. I don't like victimology, but the survivors, the 2 adults who survived this incident. Where are your thoughts right now, Kellyanne, on what we're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. There's a whole other show in here. For myself personally, I know that I would do whatever I needed to do with whatever I had at hand to protect my family. That is just something that I know about myself. I will say that in terms of outcome, the best possible thing that could be done is to share what happens after. Because everybody can say, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, but have they thought through, like, this man is going to live with trauma. The shot woman is going to live with trauma. The kids are going to live with trauma. And, nobody wins in this situation. Thankfully, the 2 adults survived, but they didn't win anything. And And I think that that is an important discussion of, this wasn't a 1 second thing that happened. And, there is an impact, as you said, a ripple effect that is going to affect so many other people, maybe forever.
And you say they didn't win any, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There
Yeah,
might
and
be a
it needs to
delay.
be talked about. Oh, sorry, I just said it needs to be talked about. Yes, nobody won.
We will be discussing later this year the concept of video games and media around gun violence, the influence of that. Does it play a role? If so, how much does it play a role? How much does it affect people or their overarching thoughts and feelings around guns and gun violence? It would be interesting. I don't know yet currently of a study on this. So if anyone knows if there's a study somewhere in the world on the effects of video games on gun violence, I sure would like to know, did these kids play video games that were violent in nature? How long had they played video games? When did they start playing video games, and what video games did they play? Like how did that have an effect? Because you don't, like, at 12 years old, at 17, even at 17 years old, crap, even at 21 years old, you don't know the long-term impacts of your choices and your actions. But we'll let a kid who's 18 buy a gun, not a beer, which is, something that was brought up earlier this podcast. It's a devastating thing. My heart goes out to the family, not only of the boy who was shot and killed, the families of all the children involved, but to the victims, the survivors in the vehicle, and to the man who had to shoot and kill that child. He will carry that for the rest of his life. He will carry that around his neck as a weight. It will never, ever leave him. It will never leave his wife. Maybe they had children. I mean, if they're like me and ever had to do that, is terrible. Does it make me want to go out and buy a gun? No. Am I going to put a gun in my car? No. If I get shot and killed, I get shot and killed. I've done enough in my life that I could die tomorrow and it'd be fine. My children are my legacy, and they will survive me, and it'll be fine. These podcasts are my legacy moving forward. The press and everything that I've done in my life. Shit, I might die from not a gunshot wound, right? We cannot predict when our death is going to be, and I'm not trying to necessarily elongate my life by owning a firearm, because I know full well that owning a firearm increases my risk of dying from my own weapon. We don't know what this man's background was. We don't know how long he had a firearm, if he had any firearm training, safety. We don't know what his job was. We don't know anything about the man who was the shooter. But certainly, if you own a gun, you ought to know what you're doing, how to use it, and be prepared to own the consequences of having said weapon in your vehicle or your home. I'm going to invite folks, if folks would like to share a poem as we close out today, unless anyone has any other pressing comments that they would like to make. Next month we will have, it's March, Women's Month, National Women's Month. So we will be doing women and guns for International Women's Day in March. It'll be March 1st, 2025. So we will be discussing women and gun ownership, and of course, the victimology, if you will, of women being on the receiving end of gun violence, especially domestic violence, which I know that Harriet had tapped into, and I am a survivor of. So that will hit home for me. Rick, you have a poem, sir?
Yes, I have a poem I'd like to offer you. This is about violence and overreaction. It's a poem that, although it has a bit of vintage to it, it remains sadly as true today as it was when it was written in 2001. It's called Homeland Security. Between the kings of Saudi oil, who Shell and Exxon dare not despoil, and those of Wall Street's fiscal toil, where betting against the working man guarantees a stock's demand, and Desert Prince with generous eye holds courts intense, where gas station cards shall pay the rent. Does the oily hand of GH's show the old CIA man still in control? Pass the ID cards, but not a fakin'. This way from true American icons shaken. Your face will now be pre-recorded and all your flights will now be boarded. Arm the pilot, the stewardess too. Next to the pillow and the barf bags fun, all passengers now will be issued guns. Oh, for a shootout in the airy blue, oh, what just a day can do. I picture the Stewie, tray in her hand, confronted by the wanted men. Tosses the tray into his face, spins on her arm, and kicks him trace. He rolls across the cart to the Boy Scout troop, who truss him up and steal his boots. His arms behind his back now tied, they bounce him over to the choir side. They pummel, pillage, then retire, and all those who were watching were inspired. Then a group of Civitan asked for a few fingers from his hand, but the brownie troop wants his bushy beard. You should have heard the things I heard. Then an old monk, Jesuit, gives him twice a goodly kick, and the secretary stabs him with her bick. And although the pilot and co-pilot were vying for priority, they submit their decision to the vote of the majority. Some wanted to toss him right out the door, but a cloister of nuns still wanted some fun. They dragged him back to the airplane's tail, where the rugby team ran him back to the gale, and up to the gallery where they banged his head 2 or 3 times on the oven's lid. A group of congressional aides in first class pulled every hair from out of his ass. A covey of comedians dove right in with a left and a right to his nose and his chin, and a group of traders down from Duluth pushed him and mashed him into the roof. Some ceiling tiles and an overhead bin broke when they tried to stuff him in. But let this be remembered and never forget: don't ever wait till your library book's late.
Oh my God, I love Rick's poems. I freaking love you. You are a national treasure in waiting. I love it. Thank you so much. I will say the Rick Spicak's book is available on the website, redorgreenbooks.com. It is stone poetry. It is a big, thick book. It's one of the biggest books we've done. It's a wonderful collection. It's got some of his rock artwork as well. Or you can get it directly at from Rick if you want a signed copy. Rick, where can people find you, follow you, all that good stuff?
The best place is to drop me an email, rwspoet@outlook.com. rwspoet@outlook.com. And the other thing I'm going to mention is we just finished recording the Shakespeare play on a Zoom Shakespeare event. We recorded Julius. And at the end, that's for the DEI hires out there. And at the end of February, we're going to be doing the Scottish play, Macbeth.
I love that. I remember signing up for one of your events originally a long time ago during COVID, and I had no idea it was the Shakespearean play. And then you assigned everyone roles, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to pay attention. I'm gonna have to be ready for when my character's line comes up. I didn't realize that's what it was, and it was a lot of fun. So I definitely encourage all of you to get hooked up with Rick and get a signed copy if you would like from him, and support all the things that he's doing. Thank you so much, Rick, for all the love and support that you've shown me and the press. All right. Harriet, do you have a poem? Neil. Yes, Neil.
No, I didn't want to butt in. If Harriet wants to go first, that's fine.
No, Harriet. Okay, so because I was, that's fine. I'm kind of going around in the circle. So let's see if Kellyanne wants to do a poem, Neil, and then I'll invite you, and I'll wrap up today with a poem because, of course, it is calling 911 and meeting Al Sharpton, and I'm going to read my poem today that actually has Al Sharpton in my poem. So Kellyanne, I will turn the floor over to you.
I'm just going to say thank you very much, and I'm enjoying this immensely, and I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you so much. Do you want to plug your platform or anything like that? You don't have to, but if you want to, you may.
Yeah, I'll drop. So I have a book called Down the Foggy Streets of My Mind with Black Lawrence Press, and I'll drop the link in chat. And it's about recovery journey from trauma.
I love that, and we should set you up a feature too at Word is Right. All right, Neil, I will turn the floor over to you. You have a poem for us today, sir, and feel free to plug yourself and your platform.
Thanks. I'll read out a poem, but maybe just give a bit of the backstory. Singapore tends to be a very peaceful place, so listening to all of you folks today, kind of, I've lived in the U.S. as a kid, but this was a lot of new stuff for me to absorb, so maybe I'll participate more next time. But this was a very unusual incident. I think it was about 3.5 years ago. There was actually a killing in a very high-end school, middle school, in the center of Singapore, where I live, and it was a very violent one, and well, any killing is violent. It was an older boy hacking to death with an axe, a younger kid. So there's the point. It's called The Axe Forgets. The axe forgets, the tree remembers. A young sapling falls to vicious hacks, lying in its own shadow on the ground. The forest lost a member. But who, but who fell through the cracks? From deep within the walls, the manic attacks, dull thuds that toll a death knell sound. In time, the trees will remember. Perhaps then, so will the axe. Thanks.
Wow, Neil, thank you so much. Would you like to plug yourself, your platform?
Yeah, I could do that. Let me, I've published 6 books, and it's with the Boutique House, and they're available in Singapore. Unfortunately, I don't do cross-border. So the best way, again, is to just reach out to me. Happy to sign them. And probably if I participate in more of these, Marissa, I can talk more about the titles and so on. But we'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, just reach out to me, send me your email, and I'm happy to send you the Google Sheets. We have the entire year set up, so you can kind of pick and choose what you would like to sign up for. And there's spots for hosts and guest hosts and guests in general for those who might just be coming to one. Okay, I guess I hate spotlighting myself, but I will do that for this poem I wrote in 2023, and it is a poem for Tyree Nichols' mom. Black boys deserve to grow old, but black still cracks beneath baton blows that make the ancestors die all over again. 5 on 1, 10 fists and 10 kicks, gurgling cries of bloody blow pop blows to the body, blows to the head, swollen face, head case concussions. Black still cracks beneath this chloroform criminal justice system, continual police brutality. They beat you back down to death, left on its doorstep, just a few houses away from your mother, the key in your pocket, locked to your freedom, to safety, to get to live another day. We're all Tyree. Black men deserve to grow old. But when innocence fails, when words fail, when common sense and truth fail, we must acknowledge that silence is death. Where is your humanity? Black still cracks beneath wailing cries, beneath shovels breaking surface of earth, ready to swallow corpses of countless martyrs, resistance in the only promised land. 6 feet under sanctuary now, riddled with mother's tears, remembering the first breath, holding baby, held down, beat. Imagine their grief, their anger. Hold your sons tight today to the dream that your grandchildren will know their fathers, will be able to watch them grow up and become grandparents, so they don't become hashtags, so they don't become murals. I'm so sorry that your name will always be remembered for this. We're all Tyree. No justice, no peace. Comfort does not come with caskets. Racket of radical, out of control enforcers of the so-called law. Does it count at the burial? If your baby is so broken and swollen, you can't recognize them. Al Sharpton is too old for this shit. The Rodney Kings, the Dr. Kings, to fall in the same place at 29 years old, same podium, same speech, creating old dreams of peace. Police body cams, gospel God's cams, so there's a record of the cracked concrete beneath broken black men and the tears of mourners, in a place where not even God dares to believe in peace anymore. Without an uprising, there is nothing. Silence is death. Black lives matter. They matter to me. We're all Tyree. And that's that piece. All right. I thank you all so much for joining me today on the American Graveyard Podcast Live. We will be back, like I said, March 1st, the first Saturday of every month. If you're interested in being on the podcast, either as a contributor, a guest, or host, please reach out to us and let us know. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and of course, our YouTube channel. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow everywhere. redorgreenbooks.com, read, READ. If you have not got your copies of American Graveyard, please do so. We are in the process of finishing volume 2. If you would like to sponsor volume 2, you want to help us fund volume 2, please do so. We are a very small press. We don't have a lot of capital. And believe it or not, it's not a very lucrative thing what we're doing. And so we do really rely on the support of our followers and the support of the community to rally together. Stay tuned. We have a lot of exciting things coming up, including a revamp of the podcast Out Loud. That is our LGBTQ podcast. If you have never published a book of poetry and you're interested, let us know. We do put debut authors ahead of the line here, as we want to open doors to as many people as possible. If you have a collection of poetry that you're looking for a home for, please reach out to us. We are invitation only, and we don't accept everyone for publication, but we will consider you, especially if you're a woman, because we are female forward press, and we do really collaborate with communities that have been historically marginalized and stigmatized. That is our bread and our butter and our love moving forward. And thank you so much to my esteemed guests today, Rick Spisak, Harriet Engel, Kellyanne Parker, Neil Deswaya. I'm so excited to see you come through. And of course, Laura Greville, who is here today. I hope to see y'all soon. I'm going to go ahead and shut the live down. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this podcast. Sam Bregman, the DA here of Bernalillo County, if you're interested in coming on this podcast, please reach out to us. I would love to have you on here and be talking more about gun violence here locally in Albuquerque. Like, share, subscribe, and follow. I'm going to go ahead and close this live off. Please be safe. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions today. Kellyanne, stay put, and I will see you all, beautiful people, next time. And I forgot I was on this other computer, which I have to stop the live for. Here we go. Bye, everyone. Are we? But we're still live. Hang on. Let me see how I can do that on here. Oh, are we live? Do we stop the live stream too, or are we still? Oh, there it is. Stop live stream. Bye, everyone.